I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
From a campaign promise to executive action, efforts to seal the southern border began on day one of the Trump presidency.
19, I have one detained. Donde vive?
This week, we're on the Arizona border where the wall is going back up and the invasion of illegal immigrants being shut down.
President Trump is only a week into his second term. But in sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago, cities and some states are planning countermeasures called Trump-proofing to combat the incoming administration.
As mayor of the city of Chicago, we're not going to bend or break or cower to someone's threat.
We talk with the policymakers.
How concerned are you that the federal government would withhold funds to the city of New York?
And the people.
That's why they're talking about Trump-proofing, because they realize all that they've said was wrong.
Make America healthy again.
And the new Trump administration is promising to make America healthy again. That could lead to a face-off with the pharmaceutical industry and its army of influence. What kind of money were the drug companies putting into spending to lobby to try to get what they wanted?
Millions of dollars.
This week, we'll show you the money and how it's spent to influence critical health care votes. Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. We begin today with the U.S. border crisis. 4 years ago, we were there when construction on the border wall was abruptly halted overnight after President Biden took office. That was followed by a history-making spike in illegal immigration, drugs, and human trafficking. In recent days, as Donald Trump was being sworn in, we headed back to the Arizona-Mexico border to see if there would be any immediate changes at Ground Zero under Trump 2.0. We're heading out with Deputy Dan Brennan of the Criminal Interdiction Team in Cochise County, Arizona.
Yeah, we're westbound on 4th right now.
As dark falls, he spots a rental car from Oregon, whose travels, documented through an elaborate tracking system, seem suspicious.
Is this your car or is it a rental, I guess?
It's a rental. You don't want to answer any questions? Do you have any ID? Okay, you got an ID card?
No, nothing I could find. In here? In a key?
2 illegal immigrants from Mexico.
19 work code 3 detained. Near the return means anything you see.
And an alleged smuggler from California. Has the human smuggling been pretty steady?
It's always been a ever-present theme. It kind of rose to the level of epidemic in the more recent years. At levels that shocked everybody that had been around a while, but it's never not been present. It's never not been a theme here in Cochise County.
It's the first full day of the Trump presidency, and change is coming to the beleaguered southern border. The wheels set in motion by President Trump.
First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came.
Cochise County Sheriff Mark Daniels.
So Cheryl, 4 years ago, this was the location where one of half a dozen locations in Cochise County that was like a little city. It had cement plant, it had 24/7 operations to build the physical barrier. It was self-contained from working the roads, from electrical, you name it. This was a bustling little place.
So you remember, we had already planned our trip here. And when we got here 4 years ago, we discovered that work had stopped overnight on border wall construction.
President Biden, with his executive order declaring this a non-emergency, shut it all down. It froze in time, and what you see is what's left, and then the fencing wall that sat here for the last 4 years.
These stacks of metal are actual pieces of border wall that were paid for and ready to install 4 years ago when the Biden administration brought everything to a sudden halt.
Look at the money sitting here.
So you think they'll use this now?
Yes. Yep. There's no reason not to. This was all this has been sitting here since Trump left office the first time.
But Daniel says the past 2 months, some of the border wall parts were sold off for pennies on the dollar. Rancher Kelly Kimbrough also saw that firsthand. She owns the Malpai Ranch along the border. When you heard that parts of the border wall were being sold off in the last recent weeks, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were that the administration leaving Washington was kind of putting the screws to the administration coming in, because that's costing you and I a lot of money. All those bollards, they have sat on our property for 4 years. They were built, they were panels, the 8-foot wide, 30-foot tall panels. They've been there for 4 years. Coolidge, Arizona had a yard full for miles of bollards and bollard panels. Guadalupe Canyon had, so then they started hauling them, and all of a sudden we were seeing semis just round the clock hauling them out.
Off your property?
Off our property and off Guadalupe Canyon.
And the camera system's changed quite a bit since you guys were last here.
Detective Cody Essery is with the Sheriff's Sabre team, Southern Arizona Border Region Enforcement. They use technology from New Mexico to California to catch illegal border crossers. What have you seen the past 4 years compared to the previous 4?
Oh, astronomical. During the Trump administration, the most that we would see, like I said, we have a camera system all along the southwest border. The most we would see in a month is maybe 900 people coming across on our camera system. There were months in the Biden administration, we were seeing 8,000 to 9,000, and that's just on our camera system.
He says since border enforcement was largely abandoned, roads built to catch drug traffickers crossing here at Montezuma Pass in Arizona have become unusable. These cuts were a passable road where you could patrol and interdict.
Exactly, and that was one of the purpose of the Trump administration in building the wall and making those roads, is if an agent needed to respond to that ridgeline up there, he could. But if an agent today needed to go to the other side of that ridgeline from here, it would take him an hour and a half going around the mountain range to get to that other side.
In this part of Arizona,
Zebra 15, the car just took off.
Illegal border crossers aren't trying to be caught and get lost in the system like so many others.
Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
Here they're smuggling fentanyl and other drugs and people.
In the trunk? You okay?
And will evade at most any cost.
Is there anyone in the car? Yeah. Trunk? Yeah. Guys, there are people in the trunk. In the trunk!
Killer cartels, now declared foreign terrorist organizations under President Trump, have earned mind-boggling profits by moving record amounts of drugs and people across the porous southern border.
45 years ago, our family found the first load of drugs on the Mexican border at our ranch. That's a long time for something not to work.
Under President Trump's new emergency order, many foresee a fresh start.
I had the opportunity on behalf of National Sheriff Association to be part of Biden's transition team, where I briefed him on all this and talked to him about border security. Within a week, that was rescinded. He declared the southwest border a non-emergency, which means it froze funding, it froze technology, it froze everything in time. So for the last 4 years, the border's the same. Nothing's changed down there.
Now what will you get in terms of, will funding open up again? Will technology be available that wasn't before because there's now a state of emergency again?
It will. It opens up that funding line. It opens up opportunity, innovation, creativity to complete the wall, the physical barrier, which does work. I don't care what people say, it does work.
Is there any way to anticipate or predict what might be the strategy or actions of the cartels if they think the border is going to be tightened up now?
Well, it's just new strategies. They just need to renegotiate what President Trump's new plans are and how they get around that. But now they have a coach on America's side that's actually going after them. So it's a more competitive game.
Well, here's the thing. You're already in trouble.
I understand. But then I feel like the
help yourself
stuff
right
was
now.
bogus.
The cartels reportedly would have charged the 2 men from Mexico $8,000 each to cross.
I gotcha.
As for the alleged smuggler, he was arrested for the exact same thing last month. For more on our coverage of illegal immigration and other Full Measure stories, you can look up my podcast, Full Measure After Hours. Coming up on Full Measure, we visit two cities that vow to protect their illegal immigrants who've been planning countermeasures to the incoming administration for months. President Trump has promised to unravel many of President Biden's domestic and foreign policies to fulfill his pledge to make America great again. The Biden team made no secret that they frantically worked to take steps to Trump-proof as much as they could before they were forced to turn over the keys to the White House. Lisa Fletcher reports Democrat cities and states have been trying to do the same.
This next order relates to the definition of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
Good. That's a good one. Birthright. That's a big one.
The executive order is one of more than 20 signed by President Trump on his first day in office and would deny U.S. citizenship to a child born in the United States if both parents are in the country illegally. The order would also apply if the child's mother is in the U.S. legally but on a temporary status, such as through a student or work visa or as a tourist.
It's ridiculous. We're the only country in the world that does this with birthright, as you know. And it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Within hours of the executive order, 22 states, San Francisco and Washington, D.C., sued the Trump administration over the birthright executive order. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays, one of the attorneys general suing the federal government, called it unconstitutional.
This lawless order is not only nakedly unconstitutional, it is an attack on families and children in this state and across this country. And it will cause irreparable damage and harm to Arizonans.
That action, temporarily blocked by a federal judge in Washington state, was one of the first countermeasures to launch in the new administration, but not the first in a campaign that started as soon as the results of the election became clear. California set aside $50 million state taxpayer dollars to be ready to sue the Trump administration on issues like illegal immigration, gun control, and transgender care. 4 others declared similar intentions. New York Governor Kathy Hochul launched the Empire State Freedom Initiative to fight any policy and regulatory threats that may emerge.
If you try to harm New Yorkers or roll back their rights, I will fight you every step of the way.
In New York City, the city council stands ready to Trump-proof the city's sanctuary city status, especially after the Democrat mayor, Eric Adams, sided with Trump on deportations.
We're not going to be a safe haven for those who commit repeated violent crimes against innocent migrants, immigrants, and longstanding New Yorkers.
Democrat council member Alexa Aviles is working to make New York both Adams-proof and Trump-proof.
What is the city council working on right now that it is most concerned that Mayor Adams or President Trump could unravel?
The biggest challenge here is the uncertainty, but we will stand by the laws of New York City. And if the mayor himself is interested in rolling back laws, we will be sure to be the check and balance.
Beyond illegal immigration, New York Democrats are also worried they could lose money under Trump administration budget cuts, which could jeopardize crucial services. Brad Lander is New York City's chief financial officer.
How concerned are you that the federal government would withhold funds to the city of New York?
Nervous enough that we're studying it very seriously. I mean, look, Elon Musk, who nobody elected, seems to, has said that he's going to cut the federal government spending by 1/3. But Donald Trump has said they're not going to cut Social Security or Medicare. All that leaves are the kinds of programs that cities, not just New York City, but cities all around the country rely on, literally, like our public hospital funding or our school lunches.
Does it make more sense for the city of New York to try to work with the incoming administration rather than preemptively work against it?
Well, it depends what things they do. If they are willing to work with us on solving the problems that the city is facing, great. I have not heard a lot of that.
The city of Chicago is bracing for impact too. A sanctuary city that is already on the list of incoming border czar Tom Homan.
If your Chicago mayor doesn't want to help, he can step aside. But if he impedes us, if he knowingly harbors and conceals an illegal alien, I will prosecute him.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has promised to protect the illegal immigrants and Trump-proof the city.
We're going to stand up and unite around our shared values, and they have my assurance that I'm going to protect the families of this city.
But native Chicagoans tell a different story about favor and focus.
There's a shooting over here.
We drove through the tough South Chicago neighborhood of Anthony O'Neill, born and raised in Chicago. He says illegal immigrants from Venezuela have brought crime and chaos to his South Side neighborhood, making life unbearable.
The cars with the hoods up?
Yep.
And what's going on there?
In Venezuela, that's part of some of their gangs. They be out there playing like they working on cars, but they selling drugs.
Do the police know? They're not doing anything? Why not?
They can't do nothing. They was told not to do nothing. The mayor gave them a code. No, off limits.
A code members of a grassroots group known as Chicago Red want to see broken. Founded by P. Ray Easley, they're calling for an end to Chicago's sanctuary city policy and want to see illegal immigrants deported.
Some cities are doing what's being dubbed as Trump-proofing, which is creating laws that fortify existing laws to prevent President Trump's administration from doing that. Is that the correct approach for elected officials?
Immigration is a federal issue. So I don't care what these people are doing. If they're going to get in Tom Homan's way, they're going to get locked up.
As in Chicago, there are plenty of opposing opinions in New York City. Republican City Council member Joanne Ariola.
Wouldn't it be better for New York City to work with the incoming administration rather than oppose it?
It would be 100% better. People are fed up. They're tired of lip service. They can't pay their own bills, and we're giving people who came here illegally credit cards, education. They weren't following the same rules that we as American citizens had to face. That just doesn't work. In ideology maybe, but not in practicality. So, that's why they're talking about Trump-proofing, because they realize that all that they've said was wrong.
What sorts of things did the Biden team do to Trump-proof?
Well, he recently loaned billions to clean energy projects, which is going to make it harder to unravel green initiatives. He sent billions in military aid to support the war in Ukraine, which is something President Trump says he does not want to do. And he's also made it difficult to reduce the size of federal government because he has made it harder to reduce the size of the federal workforce.
All right, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. When we come back, how much money America's pill makers are spending to sway Congress. The government just announced the price Medicare pays for the diabetes/weight loss drug Ozempic will soon be negotiated lower as part of a new program designed to bring down drug prices. One of 15 drugs now subject to price changes to take effect in 2027. The watchdog group Public Citizen looked into how much some of the big-name drug companies have spent fighting the new price control initiative. Some hugely profitable drugs are targeted under price controls passed as part of the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. Lisa Gilbert is with the watchdog group Public Citizen. What were these companies trying to do? What influence did they try to have on the Inflation Reduction Act?
Well, they did not like it, and that is because it's the first time ever we've been able to negotiate drug prices. As I'm sure you and everyone out there in America knows, drug prices are way too high, and one of the things that pharmaceutical companies do not want is to be able to have those prices negotiated by the government, by Medicare, so that they become lower and regular Americans can have fair pricing.
So what came out of their lobbying efforts? And then we'll talk about the money they spent.
Well, interestingly, this is one of the few times that Pharma was defeated.
The Inflation Reduction Act permits the federal government to negotiate down the price Medicare will pay to buy some older drugs, 10 to begin with, prescribed to elderly Americans. The new prices are to take effect in 2026. It's estimated 7.7 million Medicare patients took at least one of the 10 drugs in 2022, costing taxpayers $46.4 billion that year alone. Two of the costliest are Xarelto and Eliquis, both used to prevent and treat blood clots. In just 1 year alone, Medicare shelled out an incredible $6 billion for Xarelto and $16.4 billion for Eliquis. What kind of money were the drug companies putting into spending to lobby to try to get what they wanted?
Millions of dollars. In this case, $43 million in the period of time that we looked at, so 2022, 2023. They don't say in their disclosures exactly what they're fighting for, but they say that they're lobbying on the Inflation Reduction Act. And since they're all part of the Pharma Trade Association that is very outspoken in opposition, we can clearly intuit that that's what they were using it for.
From July of 2022 through 2023, Public Citizen says Bristol-Myers Squibb, connected to Eliquis, spent about $10 million lobbying. Johnson & Johnson, connected to Xarelto, spent about $11 million. They're spending even more in court. Bristol-Myers Squibb, Johnson & Johnson, and Merck are suing the federal government, calling the drug pricing negotiation program a sham, tantamount to extortion, and unconstitutional. In terms of political parties, do the pharmaceutical companies tend to lobby one much more than the other, or do they spread the money around?
It's spread around, and I think that's because, they want to be prepared for any eventuality, and they have the money to do so.
Looking forward at issues that impact our health and the drugs that we take, what do you think is a message people should know about pharmaceutical industry money and lobbying?
That it is enormous, egregious, and it is not working for you. One stat we haven't talked about yet, 143 lobbyists is how many people, individual people, they hired to run around the Hill, to walk to the administration and tell them that the Inflation Reduction Act drug negotiations were a bad idea. That just shows the scope and scale of what they're able to achieve, and certainly, the types of goals they have don't align with what regular Americans want.
Public Citizen and other consumer and health groups have filed court briefs supporting the Medicare drug price negotiation law. After a break, what's ahead next week on Full Measure? Coming up next week on Full Measure, there's never been anything like the January 6th mass prosecutions, and now never anything like the mass pardons.
I went to a maximum security facility where they held me in solitary confinement. They chained me up like Hannibal Lecter, haul me up to this unit and say, this is where we kept the 9/11 guys, and then they have to let me out every Monday morning.
We are back, baby!
The January 6th releases next week on Full Measure. Until next time, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. Thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson.